Welcome to Chapter 12, Social Development. In this chapter, there will be 5 videos representing the 5 major sections of the chapter, which you can see here with these learning questions. In this first video, we'll deal with the first learning question. What is theory of mind and how does it develop from infancy through adolescence? We're not going to really talk about adolescence too much, but I will introduce you to the concept of theory of mind. And this theory of mind is in the area of social cognition, which is about, how we think about the social world and relationships and thoughts about other people. Theory of mind is the ability to understand self and others as agents who act on the basis of their mental states, such as beliefs, desires, emotions, and intentions. So theory of mind is an understanding that people do behaviors based on what's in their mind. That if I always get chocolate ice cream because I think it's the best, and my sister always gets strawberry ice cream, if I didn't have theory of mind, I'd be surprised about why she doesn't get the best flavor, chocolate. But having theory of mind would allow me to think that perhaps she has different desires than I do, that she enjoys strawberry ice cream more than I do. So it's about understanding that other people have different beliefs than what we have, different intentions, emotions, desires, and they act according to them. So when we gain an understanding of theory of mind, it helps us to understand our own and other people's behaviors. We realize that people are acting according to what's in their minds. Just as an example, there was a study that provides some evidence that perhaps theory of mind is, at least some aspect of theory of mind is developing as early as the first year of life. And this is the study pictured here. So this was done with babies, and they watched somebody reach over a blockade, as you can see in that first picture, in order to retrieve a ball. And this was called the habituation event. So like they presented this event over and over until the baby basically got bored of it, until they lost interest in it. So they would watch this person reach over and retrieve the ball, and then they would watch the same thing again, that they'd reach over the barrier in order to get the ball, and then they tested them with they had them watch one of 2 events, and those are pictured in the bottom 2 pictures. The barrier was removed, and the person the ball once again was in front of them, and they either just reached directly straight forward, like in that first picture in B, and to retrieve the ball, or they did the same motion, like they were reaching over the barrier in order to get the ball. Now, remember that I discussed in a previous chapter that when babies stare longer at an event, it indicates that they find it surprising. And so when presented with these 2 possibilities in the bottom here, babies looked longer at the last picture, where the person was doing the reaching over motion, even though there was no barrier. And so what they hypothesized is the only reason this would be surprising to an infant is that they must have understood on some level that this person's intention was to get the ball. And so it would make much more sense just to reach directly and take the ball, like in that second last picture. And so they found it surprising that the person would do this awkward motion if their goal was to get the ball. So this, what they interpreted this as was that the baby must have had some notion that the intention of the adult was to get the ball, and this is why the doing a funny kind of reaching motion doesn't really make sense if you just want to get the ball. So anyways, people will debate what this evidence really means or not, because it's just based on, once again, on how long they look at events. But it was presented as evidence that maybe they were already in the first year starting to understand that that people have certain intentions and that they act on them. One test that gets used a lot with preschoolers to test their theory of mind is called the false belief paradigm. And so in this paradigm, they present something to the child, such as showing them a box of crayons, and they will ask them, what do you think's inside this box? And it looks like a crayons box, and so the child will say crayons, and then they open it and say, look, there's actually something else in here. Sometimes they use Band-Aids, or it might be, I don't know, Q-tips in there, or anyways, or maybe they have paper clips in there. But anyways, they have something besides crayon. They say, oh, aren't you surprised? Look, there's no crayons. And then they put the objects back in the box and close it up. So now the child knows. Let's just say it was Band-Aids. They know that there are Band-Aids in the crayons box. And then the researcher will say, look, they'll bring up a doll, such as, sometimes they use Snoopy. Look, here's Snoopy. He's been sleeping during this whole time we've been talking. He just woke up, and so now he's at the table. And so they bring Snoopy up from below the table up to the table, and they say, Snoopy hasn't seen or heard anything we've talked about, and what do you think Snoopy's going to think is in the crayon box? And up until about the age of 3, children will say that Snoopy thinks there's Band-Aids in the box, even though it's clearly a crayons box, because now they know that there's Band-Aids in there. So they believe that if it's in their head, then it's in everyone's head, and so this shows a failure of theory of mind. They don't understand that maybe Snoopy doesn't know what they know. And so what you see is up to about the age of 3, they fail the test. And after about the age of 4, they pass the test, and they realize that Snoopy's not going to know that there's Band-Aids in there. He's going to think there's crayons, just like I did at first. And so this tells us, because they fail at 3 and usually pass at 4, that somewhere between 3 and 4 they develop there's a development in their theory of mind. They start to understand that different people know different things, and that we don't all have one shared mind, basically. Anyways, I actually have a video I'm going to show you that deals with this, and you'll see the experiment I just talked about being done with the child. So let's take a look at that. Just give me one moment here as I get to the video. Okay, so we will see the false belief paradigm here.
You're gonna have a tea party with Play-Doh. I wanna serve myself. Here, Sarah. No!
Well, you've probably discovered that however smart your 3-year-old is, She doesn't seem able to put herself in someone else's mental shoes, to imagine how they think and what they believe. Perhaps you thought your parenting skills were to blame, but scientists suggest that understanding other minds is a skill that may not be fully developed until a child is about 4. To learn how children's social skills evolve between about 3 and 4, researchers use something called a false belief test. What do you think's in this box? Looks fairly obvious, doesn't it? Crayons. But let me show you. I filled it full of candles. All right, now I close it up again. While you and I have been having this conversation, Snoopy has been down here asleep. Doesn't know what we've talked about. But let's bring him into the conversation. Now I have another question for you. What do you think Snoopy will say if I ask him what's in this box? Crayons, obviously. What else could anybody possibly say? Well, watch this 3-year-old.
What do you think is inside this box? Okay, let's open it up and see.
Candles.
Now, you can ask the child what appears to be a very simple question about that. What did you think was inside the box when you first saw it? They say, oh, I always thought that there were candles in this box. Then you can ask them about someone else. So you can ask them about Snoopy. Snoopy's been sitting here. He hasn't seen this box. He's never seen us open it up. What does Snoopy think is inside this box?
Candles.
Children say the same thing. Snoopy will think there are candles inside of this box. And what that indicates is that the children's view of how minds work is very, very different from the view that you and I would have. Yes. Did you see it?
In the mind of the 3-year-old, everyone sees the world much the same way. There's no difference between what I think and believe and what everyone else, including Snoopy, thinks and believes. It is, in a sense, a naive and innocent view of the world, a kind of mental Eden. And then, about 4, comes the fall from grace.
Now, if you take the 4-year-old, quite typically the 4-year-old will tell you that, as a matter of fact, he thought there were crayons in the box, and then he found out that there were candles in the box. You can ask him about Snoopy, and he'll say, oh, no, Snoopy will think that there are crayons in this box. Great. Why will he think that?
Because it's a crayon box.
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that's going to make him think they're crayons. What's really in the box?
Candles.
Right. And then you get the 5-year-olds who are just utterly blasé and think that this is such an obvious thing, it's silly even to ask the question. What that shows is that by the time children are 4 and 5, they have a view of the mind that looks much more like our view of the mind. They understand that things can be tricky and deceptive, that you can change your mind, that things aren't always the way that they seem. And that gives them a very different vision of how the mind works and how people work.
Remember, we're sharing this. Oh, I need that. Okay, then it's my turn.
Children who pass the false belief test now understand that other people can have different beliefs, even mistaken beliefs. Some scientists suggest that this test is further evidence of innate brain circuits specialized for reading other people's minds. They call it a theory of mind mechanism.
Okay. So there we got to see the false belief test. And okay. And I just want to point out that there is a longer video on the same subject that I've included in the other videos folder on Blackboard. So, you know, if you get a chance, take a look at it. I think it's 10 or 11 minutes long, and it goes a little bit more in depth into theory of mind. Okay. So the ability to understand what others are thinking is a skill that's affected by children's experiences, including certainly parents and siblings. And research shows that parents who talk more with their children about thoughts and about wants and emotions, and this will help the child develop a theory of mind. You know, if you talk about things that happen in the head, and I think this, I believe this, but you believe something different. So like you can actually talk to each child, and this gives them the idea and helps them develop it, you know, somewhat earlier. Um, in cross-cultural research, it says here that the way in which it developed differs and, in cross-culturally, but what I'm not going to deal with the minor differences that exist, because really the bottom line is that in cross-cultural research, there's really very few differences between children and how they develop theory of mind and when they develop it. So you can do research in different cultures or different countries, and it's very typical that children develop it between 3 and 4 years of age, and in much the same way as we just saw in that video. So the bottom line, very few differences cross-culturally. It seems like it develops very similarly in one country versus another. A more advanced form of theory of mind is called recursive thinking. And this is thinking about one's own thinking. It's not just like knowing that different people have different thoughts or ideas or beliefs, but it's about being able to actually, think about thinking. And they use these kinds of pictures shown here to see if people understand what the person's thinking about, based on the pictures. So like in that first picture, the boy is thinking about the girl and her father. And in the second picture, the boy is thinking that he is thinking about himself. And in the third picture, and they get more and more complex. In the third picture, the boy is thinking about a girl, thinking about what her father is thinking about her mother. And so this first, being able to kind of follow this kind of recursive thinking, like thinking about what others are thinking, this is first found around 7 years of age or older. So you don't really see it before 7. It's obviously more advanced, and we actually like do this all the time. This isn't just like some crazy idea like why we'd even test it. I mean, we often think about what other people are thinking, and even this third picture here. I mean, I can certainly imagine a situation. Maybe I've got a girlfriend and she's told me that she thinks her father is thinking her mother is cheating on him or something like that, let's say. I mean, like, and then I might think about that. Oh, she's thinking that her father is thinking that her mother is cheating on her. I mean, like, it's like we actually have thoughts like this, these recursive thoughts, and they just come naturally to us now. But it really doesn't happen before the age of 7. So that's certainly a more advanced kind of theory of mind, understanding that being able to put yourselves in other people's shoes and think about what they're thinking. Your book mentions that this is certainly a skill used in poker. Like when you're playing your hand, you're thinking about what the other person is thinking about your hand. So you don't just think about what do they have, like in try to read the person. You actually also think, what are they thinking I have? And that kind of tells you whether you should bluff or raise the bet or fold or. And so like we actually often use this skill a lot, thinking about what others are thinking. Finally, I wanted to mention hostile attribution bias. There's some children have this hostile attribution bias, which basically means that they tend to interpret others' intentions as being hostile rather than benign. And so, for example, like let's say somebody has this attribution bias and one of their peers is nice to them. A normal person without hostile attribution bias would think, well, that's a nice person. They were nice to me. They must be kind, You'll have a good thought about them. But somebody with this hostile attribution bias always goes kind of to the negative side. And so they might think that, oh, that person would be nice because they want something from me. Like they have an ulterior motive. And that's why they're being nice. And so, they people with this hostile attribution bias constantly are interpreting things in a negative light. And so it comes from like a sense of basic mistrust of others. Um, there's a number of ways that this can develop, and we've talked before about Eric Erickson's psychosocial theory, and that remember that his very first stage during infancy is trust versus mistrust. So if a child was not cared for properly as a baby, and they were not fed on time, and they were left wet, or with a wet diaper for long periods, and not hugged when they were scared or crying. I mean, like Erickson said that person would develop a basic mistrust of others. So it may, this attribution bias, hostile attribution bias, could start as early as like the first year of life if you grew up without being cared for properly, or and it could certainly develop later. I mean, it could be passed down from parents if parents have this kind of bias themselves and are constantly talking about what other people want from them, or what other people's negative intentions are, and you were hearing that all the time as an early child, during early childhood, you could certainly kind of have that belief passed down to you. So this obviously interferes with social cognition. I mean, these children will have a basic lack of understanding of how to interpret others, and it's certainly going to interfere with their relationships. Okay, and that ends the first section from chapter 12.